Long, long ago there lived a tribe of people in a place that was bounded on 3 sides by impenetrable forests, and on the 4th by the steppe. They were a strong, brave, and cheerful people. But evil times came upon them. Other tribes came warring against them and drove them into the depths of the forest. The forest was dark and swampy, for it was very ancient, and the boughs of the trees were so closely interwoven that they shut out the view of the sky, and the sun's rays did all they could to pierce the thick foliage and reach the waters of the swamp. And wherever they reached those waters, poisonous vapors arose, and the people began to get sick and die. They had to get out of the forest, but there were only 2 ways. One was to go back over the road they'd come, but at the end of it strong and vicious foes awaited them. The other was to push forward through the forest, but there they'd encounter the giant trees, whose mighty branches were closely entwined, and whose gnarled roots were sunk deep into the mire of the bogs. They were a brave people, and they would have fought to the death with those who had once defeated them, had they not feared being wiped out in the fight. They had their forefathers' behests to defend, and if they perished, their behests would perish with them. So they sat pondering their fate through the long nights, with the poisonous vapors rising around them, and the forest singing its mournful song. And the shadows of the fires leaped about them in a soundless dance, and it seemed as if it weren't mere shadows dancing, but the evil spirits of forest and bog celebrating their triumph. Danko was one of them, and he was young and handsome. Handsome people are always courageous, and he said to his comrades, "Stones are not to be removed by thinking. He who does naught will come to naught. Why should we exhaust our energies thinking and brooding? Arise, let us go through the forest until we come out at the other end. After all, it must have an end. Everything has an end. Come, let us set forth." They looked at him and saw that he was the best man among them, for his eyes were aglow with life and strength. "Lead us," they said, and he led them. And so he led them, Danko, and they followed him willingly, for they believed in him. It was a difficult trek. It was dark, and at every step the yawning bogs swallowed people up, and the trees were like a mighty wall, barring the way. Their branches were closely interwoven. Their roots were like snakes, reaching out in every direction, and every step these people took cost them blood and sweat. For a long time they went on, and the further they went, the thicker grew the forest, and the weaker grew their limbs. And then they began to murmur against Danko, saying that he was young and inexperienced, and had no right to bring them here. But he kept walking at their head, his spirit undaunted, his mind unclouded. But one day a storm broke over the forest, and the trees whispered together menacingly, and instantly it became as dark as if here were gathered all the nights that had passed since the forest was born. And the little people walked on under the big trees amid the roar of the storm, and as they walked, the giant trees creaked and sang a sinister song, and the lightning flashed above the treetops, throwing a cold blue light over the forest for a brief instant, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared, and striking terror into the hearts of the people. And in the cold flashes of the lightning, the trees seemed to be live things that were stretching out long gnarled arms and weaving them into a net to catch these people who were trying to escape from darkness. And something cold and dark and fearsome peered at them through the dark foliage. It was a difficult trek, and the people who had set out on it grew exhausted and lost heart. But they were ashamed to admit their weakness, and so they poured out their anger and resentment on Danko, who was walking at their head. They began to accuse him of being incapable of leading them. Fear was born in their hearts, binding their strong arms. Terror gripped them as they listened to the women wailing over the bodies of those who had died of the poisonous vapors, or lamenting over the fate of the living made helpless by fear. And cowardly words came to be spoken in the forest, at first softly and timidly, but louder and louder as time went on. And at last, the people thought of going to the enemy and making him a gift of their freedom. So frightened were they by the thought of death that not one of them shrank from living the life of a slave. They came to a halt, and, tired and angry, they began to upbraid him there in the quivering darkness, amid the triumphant roar of the storm. "You are a despicable and evil creature who has brought us to grief," they said. "You have exhausted us by leading us here, and for that you shall die." "You said lead us, and I led you," cried out Danko, turning to face them. "I have the courage to lead you, and that is why I undertook to do so. But you? What have you done to help yourselves? You have done nothing but follow me, without husbanding your strength for a longer march. You merely followed me like a flock of sheep." His words only infuriated them the more. "You shall die! You shall die!" they shrieked. The forest roared and echoed their cries, and the lightning tore the darkness to shreds. Danko gazed upon those for whose sake he had undertaken such great labor, and he saw that they were like wild beasts. Many people were pressing about him, but he could detect no signs of humanity in their faces, and he knew that he could expect no mercy from them. Then resentment seethed in his breast, but it was quelled by compassion. He loved these people, and he feared that without him they would perish, and the flames of a great yearning to save them and lead them out onto an easy path leaped up in his heart, and these mighty flames were reflected in his eyes. And seeing this, the people thought he was enraged. They thought that was why his eyes flashed so, and they instantly grew wary, like wolves, expecting him to throw himself against them, and they drew closer about him that they might seize him and kill him. He saw what they were thinking, but the flames in his heart only flared up higher, for their thoughts added the sorrow to the flames of his yearning. And the forest went on singing its mournful song, and the thunder crashed, and the rain poured down. "What else can I do to save these people?" cried out Danko above the thunder, and suddenly he ripped open his breast and tore out his heart and held it high above his head. It shone like the sun, even brighter than the sun, and the raging forest was subdued and lighted up by this torch, the torch of a great love for the people. And the darkness retreated before it and plunged, quivering, into a yawning bog in the depths of the forest. And in their astonishment, the people were as if turned to stone. "Follow me," cried Danko, and he rushed forward, holding his flaming heart high above his head to light the way. And the people followed him, as if under a spell. And once more the forest began to murmur and wave its treetops in wonder. But its murmur was drowned out by the sound of running feet. The people were running ahead boldly and swiftly, lured on by the wonderful vision of the Flaming Heart. And even now there were those who perished, but they perished without tears and complaints. And Danko went on ahead of them, his heart flaming brighter and brighter.
A divining rod. A stick. It doesn't matter what kind, it's immaterial. What matters is you. You just need to tell yourself to find water. Send this thought to the rod, and that's it. It works best when you can wander around fields and forests by yourself, letting your senses take over. But when you're followed by a crowd, finding water can be difficult. For this reason, many expert dowsers search for water secretly, at odd hours, in order to get the privacy they need. We had met before. I could always feel it approaching and would know exactly when it would happen. The entire crew would go up top and wait. At first, we wouldn't see it, but could hear its retinue approach. And then, just when we had waited so long that we thought it wasn't coming, it would make its entrance. It would appear suddenly, majestically, emerging out of the mist, rising to the applause of the angry waves, dropping shards of its emerald mantle. It would slide alongside us. Even when passing at a respectful distance, the entire space between us would seem to be frozen solid, and every one of us would yearn to breathe in the air of this ancient glacier. Just then, the entire ship would be deadly calm. The crew would stay perfectly still and watch the giant disappear. And then, the spell broken, everyone would return to their routine, loud and happy as ever. But I would stay on the bridge, silently thanking it for letting us pass. The nuclear icebreaker North Wind hit an iceberg at 2:16 a.m. on the 24th of March 1968. The vessel's bow and starboard suffered heavy damage, which resulted in partial flooding of the third deck and damage to the stern starboard crane. There were no casualties, and the ship is currently still afloat. Repairs are underway but may take up to a week. So what happened? We came across that iceberg 3 hours earlier than I expected. How did that happen? How could I screw up so badly? Was it one of those moments when nature teaches you a painful lesson, and you realize that even the most experienced dowser can get it wrong? We might lose a lot more if it's as bad as it looks. Bad for whom? For the crew, where every member seems to think that navigating the North Pole is like a trip to the shops? In this place, the wind howls like a pack of wild beasts bellowing, "Go forth and behold." The beast leads you into the frozen hell. In you go, eyes wide open while the cold spreads down your throat and into your gut, where it forms a ball of ice. This is the North Pole's welcome. No marching band, no flags, no speeches. Instead, it shatters all your illusions, and suddenly, all the routine comforts of Mother Earth seem alien, half forgotten, like something in a dream. Only if this has happened to you can you truly understand the North Pole. And it will stay with you forever. To the captain of nuclear icebreaker Northwind. Upon cargo delivery, proceed to destination for temporary docking. Your ship will be subsequently decommissioned. Prepare all necessary paperwork. It's been 2 weeks, and the ship is dead in the water. Why won't this iceberg let us go? These thoughts have haunted me during the long nights as I listen to the mournful sounds of the glacier. Nothing exhausts the mind quite so much as dark thoughts. And so I was exhausted, but I finally understood. We had all stayed in our cabins. No one came out to greet it. We were all convinced we were going to get through. We disrespected it. We had no fear. And so the thin layer of our human knowledge cracked under the weight of nature. The iceberg isn't holding the ship. We became a part of it on our own. It let us in, and now we're living and breathing it and becoming all the time further entombed. We have become indifferent and brittle. It crippled us, brought us to our knees. Fear grips us tightly, and we willingly offer ourselves to it. We are still alive for now, but we will be in the power of the glacier forever. Once, during another endless stop, I was woken by a loud noise. I jumped up and went on deck, and when my eyes had adjusted to the light and I could differentiate between the skies and marble white ice, I saw streaks of red stretching as far as the horizon. Looking down, I saw the body of a huge polar bear lying on the bloody shreds as small grey people bustled about, screaming, gesturing, interrupting and congratulating each other on finally taking down the beast. Stuck in the narrow space between two low hills, for the first time in its life, the bear had to confront not nature, but nature's highest creation. Suddenly, this made me look at myself, and I saw that I was no better than them. How could I hope to change the world if I didn't start with myself? If I had to change at least one man, let it be me. Now I understand the situation even better. I feel the bear's anguish in my bones. The iceberg tightens its vise and there's nowhere to run. To fight or to give up. This is it, the most basic and the hardest choice in life. This is how we learn. This is the test. There is no time to waste. We will break free if it lets us. Lord, don't leave me now.